For many years, the league MVP is recognized as the best player on the best team. Since the NFL MVP award began in 1957, only 8 teams that didn't win their division have had an MVP winner. Those are the occasional outliers of players whose performances are too great to deny even with a lack of team success, which is the biggest case for why Joe Burrow isn't the MVP of this season, despite leading the NFL in multiple categories and having one of the best quarterback seasons since 2018. But no MVP in NFL history has ever been on a team with a losing record, meaning that Burrow must win this last game if he looks to stay in the race. However, he can still win the game and not make the playoffs, which would also drop his chances for the award to roughly 0%, considering that only one MVP winner has ever missed the playoffs in NFL history. So what are the worst team performances that ended up with an MVP winner at the end of the year? Dating back to 1973, O.J. Simpson became the first player to win MVP while not leading their division. The Bills finished second in the AFC East behind the 12-2 Dolphins, who went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Simpson also became the first and only player to this date to win the MVP without making the playoffs. OJ was able to do that by breaking the single-season rushing record at that time and becoming the first player in NFL history to break the 2,000-yard mark in a single season. But just 4 years later, in 1977, the notorious Walter Payton won the MVP on 1,800 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on the year when the Bears finished second in the NFC Central Division with a 9-5 record that tied O.J. Simpson for the worst win percentage among MVP winners to that point. However, Walter Payton's 9-5 record was different from O.J. Simpson's because Payton did make the playoffs and lost to the Cowboys, who went on to be the Super Bowl champions that same season. Then in 1979, Earl Campbell became the third player to finish second and win the MVP when the Oilers finished behind the Steelers, who were the eventual Super Bowl winners. However, in that season, Campbell and Houston had an 11-5 record that still wasn't enough to claim their division. Then came the biggest outlier of them all nearly 20 years later. Barry Sanders of 1997 won the MVP while finishing third in the Lions division behind the Buccaneers and Packers. That season, the NFL had its first ever co-MVP between Sanders and Favre, who had won the previous 2 years. Sanders had a season that put him only 50 yards away from Eric Dickerson's season rush yard record and has the worst record of any MVP in NFL history, as the Lions were 9-7 that season. However, despite the worst record among an MVP ever and the first player to finish third in their division and win MVP, Sanders still made the playoffs that year that he shared the MVP. Then in 2000, Marshall Faulk put up a league-leading 18 rushing touchdowns to win the MVP with a 10-6 record with the St. Louis Rams. The Rams finished second in the NFC West and had their second different MVP in the last 2 years. Then just 3 years later, in 2003, we had another co-MVP situation where Steve McNair shared the MVP with Peyton Manning. McNair led the Titans to a 12-4 record on the season, but finished second in the AFC South behind the other co-MVP, Peyton Manning. Then in 2008, on the verge of his third MVP award, Peyton Manning led the Indianapolis Colts to a 12-4 record that was good enough for second in the AFC South. Manning had the highest QBR in the league that season on 27 touchdowns and over 4,000 yards through the air. And the most recent was 2012 Adrian Peterson, who led the Vikings to a 10-6 record behind the Packers in the NFC North. Peterson was just 8 rushing yards away from the single-season rush yard record. His 2,000 yards led the Vikings a turnaround season from the 3-13 record they had the season before. They eventually lost to their division rival, the Packers, in the wild card, and Peterson remains the last MVP that we've seen on a team that didn't win their division. And as of now, Peterson is the last MVP to win that wasn't a quarterback. Not to mention that only 2 of the 8 players to win MVP without leading their division were quarterbacks, which just shows that as a quarterback, a lot of the winning responsibility is directly on you. And 6 of these MVPs with the least team success were running backs, and the only MVP to win without making the playoffs has been a running back. But as we go on over 13 seasons without another running back winning the MVP, it's likely that you need to be a quarterback and win your division if you want the league's most prestigious award.